The 38th Ordinary Session of the Assembly of Heads of State and Government of the African Union has been concluded recently. The Assembly is the African Union's supreme policy and decision-making organ. It comprises all member state heads of state and government. The Assembly determines the African Union's policies, establishes its priorities, adopts its annual program and monitors the implementation of its policies and decisions. The summit was held at the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. The African Union theme of the year 2025 is given a priority focus on reparatory justice and racial healing under the theme Justice for Africans and the People of African Descent through Reparations. The theme was officially launched by the heads of state and government on February 15 of 2025 as an annual banner upon which Africa must act. The African Union theme of the year for 2025, Justice for Africans and the People of African Descent through Reparations, has been officially launched by heads of state and government during the 38th African Union Summit in February 2025. This theme was decided on by the heads of state and government at the 37th Ordinary Session of the Assembly of the Union held in February 2023 in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. In the continuing pursuit of justice and equity, the conversation about reparations has emerged as a critical and transformative dialogue, the people of African descent. The scope of this conversation goes beyond historical injustices into the current fabric of societies around the world. To ensure that the theme and proposed actions are well understood ahead of the discussions, African Union has prepared a concept note. It notes that the complexities of addressing past wrongs, whether they stem from colonialism, transatlantic enslavement, apartheid or systemic discrimination, necessitate a thorough examination and a strategic approach. Having reparations for Africans and the people of African descent offers the African Union an opportunity to take leadership on the Africa reparations agenda, it's believed. It will also help to bring together the African citizenry and the African diaspora to build a common and a united front for the cause of justice and the payment of reparations to Africans for historical crimes and mass atrocities committed against Africans and the people of African descent, including colonization, apartheid, and genocide. Additionally, reparations as the theme of the year will further drive momentum generated over the years for the African Union Commission to promote an active African Union-wide engagement on the subject of reparations in close coordination with the African Union member states, regional economic communities, African Union organs such as the African Court on Human and People's Rights, the African Union Commission on International Law, the Pan-African Parliament, the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, and the African Union Advisory Board Against Corruption, as well as the United Nations system and other relevant partners. Reparatory justice for Africa can promote healing, equity, and the recognition of the rights and the contributions of African peoples when defied. It encompasses a range of initiatives aimed at addressing historical injustices stemming from colonization, slavery, and systemic discrimination, including many others. Regarding these and other issues, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed of Ethiopia has raised cornerstone points in his welcome speech addressed to the 38th Summit of African Union.
The cradle of Pan-Africanism and a proud champion of African unity and freedom. It is an honor to stand before you today as we reflect on the immense potential we hold not just as individual nations, but as a united and dynamic continent. In a world marked by rapid change and multiple challenges, we find ourselves at a crossroads of uncertainty and opportunity. This moment calls upon us to strengthen our collective resolve, embrace resilience, and foster unity across Africa. The theme for this year's assembly calls on us to heal the scars of historical injustice and overcome lingering trauma that has long hindered our progress. The demand for reparations is not about charity or financial aid. It is a call for justice. It seeks to restore the dignity of millions and heal the deep scars of poverty, inequality, and discrimination. It demands an end to the systematic exploitation of our wealth, resources, and opportunities. It also calls for a transformative process that acknowledges past harms and takes bold steps to right the wrongs caused upon us, upon society across the continent. Thank you. Thank you. Most importantly, the call for reparations requires not just words, but concrete actions to affirm the equal worth of every human being. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, to achieve lasting peace, justice, and prosperity, we must rise above the geopolitical tensions and the historical divisions imposed upon us by colonial borders. By fostering solidarity among all of our nations and embracing a shared destiny, we can pool our resources and talents to unlock our continent's full potential. Africa's cultural, ethnic, and linguistic diversity is a source of pride and strength upon which we must build inclusive governance and equitable development. Conflict resolution, diplomacy, and peace building must remain at the heart of our efforts. By championing African solutions to African challenges, we can secure lasting peace and stability. Let us celebrate our achievements in politics, science, economics, and arts. Strategic initiatives such as the African Continental Free Trade Area give us the tools to boost intra-Africa trade, reduce external dependency, and achieve self-reliance. With Africa's large and dynamic use, abundant natural resources, and growing technological innovations, we have all the means to ensure sustainable growth. The rapid advancement of artificial intelligence, particularly generative AI, offers unprecedented opportunities to transform our economies and societies. By collaborating in AI, fintech, renewable energy, and mobile technology, we can address shared challenges such as climate change, infrastructure gaps, and public health crisis. Africa's rich and diverse data sets are essential for training robust and inclusive AI models. This highlights the importance of African representation in shaping future technologies. However, as we embrace these advancements, it's essential to protect our data sovereignty, prevent digital exploitation, and develop homegrown AI solutions that reflect African values and contexts. As our data sets grow, so must our capacity to harness them for local and global good. When used responsibly, AI can be a powerful tool in conflict prevention, transparent governance, and inclusive development. Africa must actively participate in the global technology race to ensure we are competitive players in the evolving digital landscape, while also ensuring we benefit equitably from this technological revolution. Furthermore, Africa's voice on global issues must grow stronger, ensuring that we have a say in shaping governance frameworks and other much-needed reforms in the global order. By empowering grassroots movements, youth networks, and educational programs focused on digital literacy and technological innovation, we can inspire the next generation. This will ensure Africa stands not just as a beneficiary of a global advancement, but as a key contributor in shaping the future of humanity. Excellencies, the opportunities before us are immense. Ethiopia is determined to prosper, guided by a vision of vibrant democracy, sustainable economic growth, rich cultural heritage, social progress, and a deep commitment to environmental regeneration. To realize this goal, we have laid out a pragmatic roadmap rooted in the transformative principles of Madamar. Madamar, an Amharic term loosely translated as synergy, is our guiding philosophy. It is a homegrown ideology that promotes prosperity, unity, sovereignty, security, and national dignity. At its core, Madamar encourages social and economic advancement, celebrates diversity, and nurtures a spirit of community grounded in Ethiopia's rich culture, spirituality, and values. Reflecting on the progress of the past 5 years and building on the vision of Madamar, Ethiopia has made remarkable strides. Despite inheriting a nation deeply divided along ethnic lines, burdened by substantial debt, and facing numerous internal challenges, we have moved forward with determination. At the same time, we navigated a complex and ever-changing regional and international landscape. Yet, through resilience and cooperation, we continue to move closer to the realization of our shared vision of prosperity. Our achievements speak for themselves. Allow me to share a few highlights. We have reformed our political system, transforming into an inclusive multi-party framework that reflects the diversity of our nation. To deepen these reforms and foster cohesion, reconciliation, and peace, we are undertaking a national dialogue. On the economic front, we have built a resilient and diverse economy. Over the past 5 years, we have doubled our cultivated land, increasing crop production to nearly 700 million quintals, with the wheat accounting for 40% of this total. These efforts have strengthened food security and driven rural development. Today, Ethiopia is the largest wheat producer in Africa. Thank you. Through collective efforts, we have reduced external debt by over 50%, double both GDP and GDP per capita, and tripled government revenue in 5 years, with an 8.1% growth reported in the most recent fiscal year. Across the country, our major cities are evolving into dynamic, culturally rich, and sustainable hubs. In education, we have established 40,000 kindergartens and primary schools to boost early childhood education. Additionally, we have launched a program to train 5 million coders to strengthen our digital economy. Furthermore, we strive to honor our heritage by restoring national sites, developing tourist destinations, and reclaiming cultural artifacts, fulfilling our duty as the guardians of our nation's treasures. These accomplishments reflect the unwavering spirit and resilience of the Ethiopian people and underscore our firm commitment to advancing Ethiopia's future. With its focus on unity, cooperation, innovation, and shared progress, Madamar can serve as a guiding framework for our Pan-African agenda. By embracing its principles, we can forge a path toward a more just, equitable, and prosperous future for all Africans. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let us march forward with determination, harnessing the limitless potential of our continent and its people. The time is now to claim our future, build a legacy of equality and prosperity, and secure dignity for all. Let us be the generation that unites the continent and our diaspora in a shared vision of justice, prosperity, and peace. To conclude, I thank our outgoing chairperson, President Mohammed Ould, for his leadership and representing our organization on the global stage. Allow me to also warmly congratulate our newly chairperson, President Joe Lorenzo, and wish him success during his tenure. I would also like to take a moment to express my heartfelt gratitude to His Excellency Musa Faki Mohammed for his exemplary leadership as chairperson of the African Union Commission over the past 8 years. Throughout his tenure, His Excellency Musa Faki has shown unwavering commitment to Africa's development, peace, and integration, significantly strengthening the African Union's role in addressing the continent's challenge. I also extend my sincere thanks to him for being a steadfast friend of Ethiopia, supporting us not only during our times of success, but also in our moments of difficulty. Thank you, my brother. As we bid farewell to His Excellency Musa Faki, it is with great pleasure that I extend a warm welcome to our incoming chairperson of the African Union Commission here in Ethiopia. I am confident that under his leadership, we will continue to make great strides toward achieving our collective goals. I wish him every success during his mandate.
Well, I have been coming to these summits for the last 30 years, working with conflicts across Africa and working very closely with the African Union from the time of the OAU Conflict Management Center to now the Political Affairs, Peace and Security Department. We have collectively, with other institutions, with the African Union, with the REX, built a architecture, the African Peace and Security Architecture, which is one of the best in the world, and has managed to resolve a lot of conflicts. But as you know, we have seen a resurgence in conflicts across Africa, and so there is still a lot of work to be done. And hopefully, this African Union now with a new chair, new executive, the Political Affairs, Peace and Security Commissioner is coming back, so there will be continuity, and hopefully we will be able to have success in resolving some of the pressing conflicts on the continent. That they have all given a very positive image of the continent, where we are going, the progress that we are making, but they also recognize that we have real difficulties that we have to get through on the continent. And so I think if we have to achieve the Africa we want, 2063, we have to really get down to work after the summit to make sure that we look at the opportunities we have on the continent, exploit those opportunities, and then look at the threats that we have and challenges and get down to work to resolving those threats and challenges. Firstly, it's about our respect and dignity. And there must be an acknowledgement that crimes were committed against our people, and that must be acknowledged. That will give us back our dignity and respect. And then, of course, we must talk about the fact that the loss of revenue to the continent over a period of time, and there should be some negotiated settlement to ensure that we do get justice for what was done on our continent. Our minerals must belong to us. We are tired of our minerals being extracted without it being beneficiated on our continent. Prime Minister Abiy talked also about industrialization. He talked about industrialization of agriculture here in Ethiopia. And we want to make sure that our resources do not leave the continent without adding value. And the adding of value must be done by Africans, so we create employment. So we deal with an employment challenge. We deal with the challenge of getting more revenue for our continent, and that's how we are going to transform our continent. So this is not a negotiable issue as we move into the future. The minerals must belong to us, must be beneficiated by us if we are going to transform our continent. My first time to Addis was in 1993. So I am coming to Addis for 32 years, and I have seen the phenomenal development here in Ethiopia. We are very proud of it, and we wish the Ethiopians well, and we would like to see Ethiopia being an example for the rest of our continent and the world, and we would like to see that their social cohesion must be held together. This is the main thing. Whatever challenges they have in Ethiopia, they must also be able to resolve it in a way that allows them to continue with this development.
Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, on his part said the partnership between the United Nations and the African Union has never been stronger. Together, the partnership sees an Africa brimming with hope and possibility. Africa has a booming, enterprising population, including the largest number of young people in the world. As well, Africa possesses some of the world's best renewable resources. The African Continental Free Trade Area is poised to turbocharge the region's economy, and the calls to address the legacies of colonialism and slavery are growing louder, as reflected in the African Union Theme of the Year, and as reflected in the leadership of so many passionate voices for the liberation of Africa, such as the great Dr. Sam Nujoma of Namibia, whose life should be celebrated. The world must never forget that Africa is a victim of two colossal and compounded injustices. Let's hear from him.
The partnership between the African Union and the United Nations has never been stronger. Together, we see an Africa booming with hope and possibility. You have a booming, enterprising population, including the largest number of young people in the world. The African continental free trade is poised to turbocharge the region's economy, and calls to address the legacies of colonialism and slavery are growing louder, as reflected in your theme this year, and as reflected in the leadership of so many passionate voices for the liberation of Africa, such as the great Dr. Sam Nujoma of Namibia, whose life we celebrate and whose loss we mourn. The world must never forget that Africa is the victim of two colossal and compounded injustices. First, the profound impact of colonialism and the transatlantic slave trade. The roots stretch back centuries, and the bitter fruit continues to affect Africans and people of African descent to this day. Decolonization alone in itself was not a panacea. Political independence did not free countries from structures based on exploitation and decades of economic, social, and institutional underinvestment. It is high time for reparatory justice frameworks to be put in place. Second, Africa was under colonial domination when today's multilateral system was created, and that injustice endures. Look no further than the United Nations Security Council. There is no excuse that Africa still lacks permanent representation in the 21st century. I will keep working with the African Union and all member states to ensure the representation Africa needs and the justice you deserve, including with 2 permanent members of the Security Council. And we will keep pressing together for an international financial architecture that is no longer outdated, dysfunctional, and unfair. Correcting age-old injustices is essential to address here and now challenges. And the good news is that we have many of the solutions we need. Last year, you helped drive that effort at the United Nations with the Pact for the Future. And I thank Africa for its support that was vital to approve the Pact. Our task now is to make those commitments a reality. South Africa's G20 chairmanship could not come at a better time. Let me point to 4 areas for action. First, we must push for peace, security, and alleviating appalling levels of human suffering. Sudan is being torn apart before our eyes and is now home to the world's largest displacement crisis and famine. As we near the holy months of Ramadan, it is time for an immediate cessation of hostilities. And the international community must come together to stop the flow of weapons and the bankrolling of bloodshed. In the Democratic Republic of the Congolese people have been suffering yet again from a brutal cycle of violence. And the fighting that is raging in South Kivu as a result of the continuation of the M23 offensive threatens to push the entire region over the precipice. Regional escalation must be avoided at all costs. There is no military solution. The deadlock must end, the dialogue must begin, and the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the DRC must be respected. The conclusions of the recent joint EAC-SADC summit offer a way forward, with a renewed call for an immediate ceasefire and new momentum for regional efforts based on the Luanda and Nairobi processes. Now is the time for swift implementation. And you can count on the continued support of the United Nations, including MONUSCO. In the Sahel, the clear and present threat of terrorism is undermining peace, security, and sustainable development. And in Somalia, we are urging predictable funding for the African Union support and stabilization mission, and I hope that our voice will be heard by the Security Council. And as we gather here in Africa, I know all our minds are also very much on Gaza. A resumption of hostilities must be avoided at all costs. The Palestinian people have suffered too much. I welcome efforts by the parties to abide by the ceasefire agreement and urge action for a permanent ceasefire and the release of all hostages. Peace is possible in the Middle East, and that starts with tangible, irreversible, and permanent progress towards the two-state solution, Israel and Palestine, living side by side in peace and security. Excellencies, on all fronts, we stand shoulder to shoulder with the African Union to advance security, stability, human rights, and rule of law. Excellencies, second, we must keep working together to deliver the AU 2063 agenda and the 2030 agenda for sustainable development and drive action on finance. African countries pay up to 8 times more to borrow than developed countries, and 20 are in or at risk of debt distress. The Pact for the Future supports an international financial architecture reform to reflect today's economy, ensuring fair representation and urging effective action on debt relief. And I will stand with Africa as a matter of justice and to right the historic wrongs. Excellencies, third, the climate crisis. Climate disasters are tearing across Africa, destroying lives, upending livelihoods, devastating economies, and inflaming conflict. At the same time, the renewables revolution is unstoppable, and Africa is poised to become a global clean energy powerhouse. Yet, today, Africa receives just 2% of global renewables investment. Realizing Africa's potential requires access to affordable finance, including by implementing the COP29 finance decision fully and on time, and supporting development of a roadmap to realize $1.3 trillion a year. Excellencies, Africa has contributed little to the climate crisis, yet is paying the price with record droughts, floods, and heat. Climate justice requires a massive investment in adaptation, with the international community bearing an enormous responsibility. Developed countries must double adaptation finance, and countries must significantly boost the loss and damage fund. Allow me a note. When the Loss and Damage Fund was created, the pledging conference that took place has allowed for an amount that is equivalent at the highest contract for a basketball player in the United States. It is absolutely necessary to make the Loss and Damage Fund an effective instrument to support developing countries in adaptation. And we also need justice when it comes to your abundant critical minerals. Too often, your countries are plundered, bound to the bottom of value chains as others grow rich on your resources. The work of the United Nations panel on critical energy transition minerals is designed to help embed justice, sustainability, and human rights across the value chain. Africa's minerals must benefit Africa's people.
I think Africa should come out united. I think for a long time we have not been seeing things together, even if we agree on things that we need to do as a continent. But you find that once we are back home, we tend to do things that are not in agreement with what we have undertaken to do as an African continent. And as you have seen, that global tensions and the situation around the globe, including what America is doing now, it will require Africa to be united to succeed. If not, no, we'll struggle as a continent. I would recommend that Africa speaks in one voice, even in that particular issue, because when you talk about reparations, you will need reparations from countries that had controlled you before. So most of those countries, we know them, where they stand when it comes to African leaders and African politics. So we need to be strong. We don't need to go to the table begging. We need to be very clear on what we demand and what we need, because they are what they are, those first world countries, because of what of the Africans import. We went there, we were taken there as slaves and so many other things which were not good, and developed their countries. It's time they give back. The issue of donations and grants are not helping Africa. But we also need trade. We need to trade with them. We don't need to, to do this Mickey Mouse friends and, I think the developments that have happened around, and also I can say maybe because we know the China influence in Africa, I know that they supported the building of the new AU office, the head offices, and they've not only done that, they've also supported countries, reconstruct, and we have reconstructed well, and Addis is very good, it's very nice. It's quite interesting what you see. I can only hope our people can cope with what is happening around them, because in most cases you find that we have nice structures, but our people are unable to occupy those. Let me hope Ethiopians are able to utilize the structures that we see.
The Executive Council of the African Union convened under the agreed African Union theme for 2025, Justice for Africans and the People of African Descent through Reparations, which was officially launched by the Assembly. Throughout 2025, all African Union member states will review and assess the achievements made by the continent towards the attainment of long overdue justice and the reparations following decades of colonialism, apartheid, slavery, the slave trade and the transatlantic slave trade. The 46th ordinary session of the Executive Council took place against the backdrop of an African continent that is facing a myriad of challenges, including threats to democratic governance, peace and security through unconstitutional changes of government, and post-election violence. Most African countries are unable to meet citizens' basic needs, such as health, education, and employment, due to their debt burden. Depending upon these and the pertinent issues of the continent, the Executive Secretary of Economic Commission for Africa, Claver Gatete, has made remarks.
It is an honor to address this esteemed gathering at the 46th Ordinary Session of the Executive Council of the African Union under the significant theme, Justice for Africans and the People of African Descent through Reparations. I wish to extend my gratitude to the African Union Commission for prioritizing this theme of the year, and I would like to use this opportunity to congratulate the African Union Chairperson, His Excellency Musa Faki Mohamed, for his exemplary leadership throughout his tenure. We thank you very much. I also salute the heads of state and government who have committed to launching the 2025 theme in their respective countries, demonstrating their collective resolve to secure justice for Africa and its diaspora. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, we cannot contest the fact that the transatlantic slave trade and colonial exploitation robbed Africa of its people, resources, and dignity, and left behind inequalities that persist in global financial systems, trade structures, and governance institutions till this day. The extraction of Africa's resources without corresponding development, the undervaluation of the African economies in global credit assessments, and the systemic barriers to trade and investment are indeed contemporary manifestations of the historical injustices. It is therefore crucial that these beyond financial compensation must be addressed as part of our conversation on reparative justice. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, Africa's current global financial standing reveals the stark inequalities it faces. The continent possesses 30% of the world's mineral reserves, including 40% of the gold and up to 90% of its chromium and platinum. It also contains as much as 65% of the world's arable land, yet Africa accounts for less than 3% of global trade and only 1% of global manufacturing output. Furthermore, in 2023, for example, intra-African trade stood at just 16%, compared to the intra-European trade at 68%. Moreover, it is unjust that the entire African continent has an IMF shareholding equal to one of a single country, Germany. These disparities are not just due to lack of economic potential, but to entrenched structural barriers that keep Africa in a cycle of economic dependency. Distinguished delegates, in addition to this, the injustice extends to Africa's credit ratings, which are dominated by external agencies that sometimes apply unfair and subjective assessments to African economies. As we speak, only 2 countries, Botswana and Mauritius, hold investment-grade ratings, while others, despite sound economic fundamentals, are burdened with high-risk labels. This situation inflames borrowing costs, stifles investment, and keeps African economies locked in debt cycles. Added to these economic disparities is the fact that although Africa contributed the least to climate change, it is suffering the most from its effects. Currently, climate change is costing Africa up to 5% of GDP. Yet, of the $10 trillion invested in globally in clean energy between 2015 and 2022, Africa received only 2%. However, this must change. Africa cannot build prosperity on a foundation designed to constrain its growth. To translate this call for justice into tangible outcomes, I propose 5 key areas of focus. First, the current global financial architecture is outdated, inequitable, and unjust, and must be reformed to be fit for purpose. We must advocate for debt restructuring that allows African nations to invest in their people and development instead of paying exorbitant interest rates. A just world requires governance reforms in international financial institutions to ensure that Africa has a strong voice in shaping global economic policies. Also, it is imperative to establish an African-led credit rating agency to ensure fair assessments reflect Africa's true economic realities rather than outdated risk perceptions. Second, the African Continental Free Trade Area is a game changer. With a market of 1.5 billion people and a combined GDP of over $3 trillion, it presents an unparalleled opportunity to boost industrialization and trade within the continent. It is therefore essential to fully harness the CFTA's potential to accelerate investments in infrastructure and manufacturing to reduce dependency on external markets. It is also paramount that we develop regional value chains to ensure that Africa produces and processes its own raw materials and creates jobs and industries that benefit Africans. Third, we must prioritize in-continent value addition on Africa's vast mineral wealth. For centuries, Africa's wealth has fueled the prosperity of others while its own people remain impoverished. This must end. Africa's resources must benefit Africans first, rather than being exported in raw form and re-imported at a very high cost. True reparative justice means that Africa's resources must work for Africa. Fourth, we must recognize that Africa's strength extends beyond its borders. In this regard, the African diaspora, which is connected to the continent through historical injustices, must be a key partner in our development. To this end, we must foster economic and cultural partnerships with the diaspora through investment platforms and heritage initiatives, such as the establishment of scholarships programs for descendants of enslaved Africans to reconnect with and contribute to Africa's development. Furthermore, we must reclaim our identity and history by demanding the restitution of stolen African artifacts and cultural heritage. Finally, the forced movement of our ancestors centuries ago must now be countered with the freedom of mobility. We must accelerate the African integration because a fragmented Africa can never reach its full potential. This requires that we implement the Africa Protocol on free movement of persons to facilitate trade, knowledge transfer, and cultural unity and strengthen regional economic cooperation to enhance resilience and shared prosperity. Excellencies, the injustice of the past must no longer define Africa's future. We have the tools, the resources, and the will to reclaim Africa's agency. And the ECA remains steadfast in our commitment to work with you and bridge the gap between Africa and the diaspora, reclaim our economic sovereignty, and secure a future where all Africans can live with dignity and prosperity.
The 38th African Union Summit has been concluded with sound decisions, the new measures which are hoped to uplift the lives of African population. Huge issues like Agenda 2030 and 2063 are given due emphasis to be acted towards. Everyone is looking for the realization of the Africa we want.